Levi William EagleFeather, the founder of the Iron EagleFeather Project, is a Sicangu Lakota from the Rosebud Sioux Reservation in Rosebud, South Dakota. At age 4, Levi was forcibly removed from his family and adopted to a Nebraska farming family, a practice quite common at the time. No longer having access to his community or his culture, he ran away at age 15. By age 17, he had joined the U.S. Marine Corps, where he served from 1974 to 1978. Experiencing a cultural reawakening in his 20s, he returned to his Lakota roots and began relearning the history, ceremony, and tradition that is the bedrock of the Lakota lifestyle. During this time, he worked as a union carpenter, then electrician, raised 5 children, and was foster parent to many at-risk youth. In the 90s, he made it his life work to reintroduce the Lakota way by utilizing the emerging cultural revitalization movement. He used the tools he learned from studying psychology in college and his time spent in the Western world in combination with the ceremony and tradition of his people to work with at-risk youth and adults on and off the reservation. He has worked in crisis centers, group homes, and foster care settings, developing programs for more than 20 years. He has conducted spiritual camps and developed workshops using cultural activities for decades. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Levi EagleFeather. Levi.
All of you know that climate change is real. I also know from my visit here at your campus that you hold many of the same values and ideas that a lot of us Lakotas hold. And it shows in the way that you treat your people and how supportive you are of all the people within your group, your culture, your business. All of these core principles and understandings come from our shared need of each other, and you found that. And it's a shared need that we need to interact and find our optimum selves. As a son, a father, and a grandfather, like you, I know we all care for our parents, our children, our partners, and much more. We share those same feelings. I'm here to share with you my understanding, some of which is shared by other grassroots Lakotas, where I'm from, of how Lakota thought and life practices direct our thinking and reasoning where I'm from. One of the things that directs our thoughts and our reasoning is prayer. In Lakota, we look at songs as holding these prayers. I'm going to start my presentation with one of those prayers, and I'll explain to you a little bit about it. The words are very simple. It is, Grandfather, as some of you might think it might be God. I'm having a hard time, help me. Very simple. Most of our prayers in Lakota are very simple. I have divided my presentation into 4 parts. Each part I will be introducing with one of those prayers, and each song I will be explaining when I sing it. When we think about who we are and what we are, in Lakota, it is a common held belief, we may not state it this way all the time, but it's a common held belief that all of us, everything, is made of the metals, minerals, and liquids of the earth, and that we get our energy from the sun. When we think of it this way, it's inescapable to recognize that the earth would be our mother. We're made at our DNA level, our forms of the metals, minerals, and liquids of the earth. In the same token, when we get our energy from the sun, we would think of the sun as being male or father sky. And those things are as natural and very easy to understand. The ceremonies and rituals passed down by my relatives not only help me understand my responsibility to include the earth in when I think about my health and welfare. It's like thinking of your mother. It's a natural process. And as an adult, as a son and as a father, it's my responsibility to learn as much about these things as I can, simply so that I can pass them on to my children and to my grandchildren. Okay? But let me remind you, before I get started, that I was raised away from my people. I was taken from my people. So I grew up in Western society without any of these ceremonies and rituals. I think what's important to non-Lakota people to understand when I bring this message that I bring is that as a human being, not as anything else, but as a human being, I am the same as you in the fact that I was able to learn this culture, Lakota culture. Okay, a lot of times we get into these talks about, who we are and what we are and DNA, and somehow it happens that from DNA we become Lakota. But actually being a Lakota is about, in our way, is about being good allies, good relatives, good parents, all of the same things that you hold, but that is our focus. Okay, it's not to go out and be the best at everything else other than just being who we are as human beings. But these ceremonies and rituals, as we get into them and we began to teach them and we began to model them for our children, because children oftentimes follow what we model better than what we try to teach verbally, that they become you become them. And every time that you think, that is what you think first. And that's why I said these ceremonies and rituals help us to think of Mother Earth before we make bigger decisions about our own health and welfare. Okay, now when we think of being made of the metals, minerals, and liquids of Earth, we tend to think that is what makes us human beings. Okay, but that's just our human form. It's actually the energy that we get from the sun that our ceremonies and rituals are trying to direct. Okay? And in Lakota, we believe that energy, okay, that energy that is our life force, our being, if you can catch that, it's what we are being, okay, is what that energy directs, okay? And in Lakota, we have our own ways of looking at things. That actual energy force that is our being, we think is divided into 4 parts, okay? And in Lakota, this would be like a map. To the west, okay, we consider that part of our being is spiritually based, okay? Another part to that being is the emotion. Another part is intelligence, information. The last part is physical. Our being is connected to all those 4 parts. That energy, in our belief, it is our environment and how we model our social awareness and our personal awareness that allows people to learn faster than if we sit them in the classroom and try to teach them the morals and the values that we normally, in the normal way that we do this. Throughout my relearning Lakota ways of life, and I spent a lot of time in an environment where most of us young Indian people were doing this. We were also involved in places like going to the university having jobs in Western society. And oftentimes, we don't often think of how those things influence the way that we think, reason, and behave. And one of the things that I discovered during that time is that almost all of this information that Lakota people talk about and other people talk about spirituality is known. It's been reported on, it's been documented, it's been written, but somehow we've been separated from a lot of that information. And even in Lakota, we're finding that a lot of information that we use today, a lot of us find that information from reading. A lot of us find that information from watching, like this, in different settings where somebody comes and they teach us about certain things. This is something that is modern. And in doing this discovery, you find out that there's a lot of people along the way that have had associations with Indian people that have done incredible studies and left big bodies of information behind them. And then while I was in college, I studied psychology, and I ran across a lot of people that pointed me in directions that helped me learn how to apply a lot of the cultural activities and programs that I do so that they were more cultural in the design and in the implementation, the methodology. One of these gentlemen that I talk about, or that I utilize some of his theories, is Erik Erikson. How many of you have heard of him in psychology? Erik Erikson, okay. A few of you have. Well, Erik Erikson was of German heritage, and he was a psychologist. He came to America. But one of the things that he did was that he studied in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, on the Ogallala Lakota Reservation. He worked in an elder's home, and he did, of course, studied them as he was working there. He's written in several books about those relationships. One of the things that he came up with, and that he's famous for, is his design of developmental stages for human beings. And we think of, he has like 8 of them that he developed, all the way from childhood to death. That's all good. In Lakota, we have 4 basic developmental stages. That's childhood, of course, youth, or young adult, and elders. And like this, we believe that there are, of course, birth, all of those things are covered on this medicine wheel as well. The 4 different developmental stages. Along with learning and studying Erik Erikson's work, I also ran across a guy by the name of Howard Gardner. How many of you have ever heard that name? Okay. Now, Howard Gardner proposed the theory of multiple intelligences. Okay, and as Erik Erikson's work kind of aligned with the way the Lakota believe in developmental stages, we as Lakota people also realize, whether we call them intelligences or not, sometimes we call them gifts, sometimes we call them strong points, but these intelligences, we believe that there are more than one way of seeing and doing things, understanding things. The intelligences that Howard Gardner came up with are, as we look at them across developmental stages from childhood to adulthood, we start with interpersonal, learning that relationship between a mother and a baby. That's very inter. And about intrapersonal, we learn that as a very young child, how we should behave. Okay? Then we go into bodily kinesthetics. We all are familiar with how kids learn how to put things in their mouth. Okay? Bodily kinesthetics, how to do the things that we do in a normal day. Logical mathematical, that's another type of intelligence that Howard Gardner talked about or believed in. Then there was linguistic intelligence. And linguistic intelligence, the Lakota people kind of part a little bit from this because we believe that communication, a lot of communication, is nonverbal. And we have communication between many, many different things around us in our environment. And I think you're aware of some of those things. I hope you are, and I'll talk about a little bit of them later on. Another intelligence is musical. We believe that there's a musical intelligence, a musical component. And the last one is spatial. And this is one that we get to as adults, as elders. Okay, and that's how things actually fit together. That's having a good idea of what the macrocosm is about. Okay, that's how we view spatial. Okay, and one thing that we discover also when we study psychology is about behavior management or modification. We all understand what that is, right? You got up this morning, you came to work, the first stop sign that you ran into, that's behavior modification. And I think a lot of psychologists spend a lot of hours figuring out how to do that. But that's what external behavior modification is about. Lakota culture, as we look at it, is a way of imparting or instilling internal, behavior modification. I would like to explain a little bit about how this is happening. I'm going to use the example of a stove, a hot stove, a wood stove, okay? And you have a baby, and the baby is sitting on the floor. The baby starts to walk to the stove, and the first thing an adult sees that, he goes over there, no, it's hot. And you bring him back. You set him down. 2 seconds later, he thinks it's a game. He goes, Parent, no, hot. And we bring him back. The example for the Lakota lifestyle is where he comes up there and he touches the stove, and as he touches the stove, he say, no, hot. That information has been transferred to internal now. And this is the kind of practical application of these cultural ways that I am trying to talk about. Okay? Now, I'm ready to sing the second song. Lakota ceremony and ritual is a way that shows us how to fit into this big macrocosm, natural macrocosm. Okay? So our prayer songs are also guide us along that way. The song that I'm about to sing is called Mother Earth Song. And the gist of this song is, Grandfather, the Creator, I'm standing here. Life is hard. Help me with my energy. It is my purpose to live with Mother Earth. And as I told you before, it's the ceremonies and rituals of Lakota lifestyle that control that from birth to life. They control the way we learn and the kind of information we get through the developmental stages. But what they're actually controlling is those intelligences that we have. Okay? And when you think of ceremonies and rituals, they're not the actual conditioning elements that instill the behavior. The actual ceremonies and rites that I'm talking about, the rites that I'm talking about, are what guide the whole nation. There are many, many more ceremonies and rituals that are independent of the small groups and the families and the individuals, but there are 7 overarching ones that have a goal and that help us to be who we are as Lakota people. Of course, one of the first ones would be making of relatives, or hunkapi. And that can be considered as part of a naming ceremony and an adoption type of ceremony. It's a making of relatives. You have a new child come in, of course you want to name him. That's a part of what one of these ceremonies is about. And every developmental stage that we enter into, I would say the ages would be 0 to 13 into maybe our 20s, then we become an adult, 20s into the whatever, and then the eldership at the end, okay? And that's kind of how you look at it. Next rites that we would be involved in, probably on a communal level, as young people, would probably be the inipi, or purification ceremony, especially for boys. A long time ago, it used to be a man-only ceremony. And I think it's changed in large part over the years because of our not only indoctrination, but assimilation to a patriarchal society. And a long time ago, women, because of their moon, the menstrual cycle, had a way of purifying themselves. At least this is culturally how we look at it. And men did not. And men needed one. We needed a way to make life as well. This ceremony is also considered at times to be a way that we go, we pray, we re-energize ourselves, we make life. Women don't need that. They're the only part are the only part of our society, the only ones within our society that can actually create life. Then you enter into that next, we would call it teens, young adults, and those ceremonies that impact us at that time for girls would be preparing a girl for womanhood. And that happens at their first menstrual time. The throwing the ball is also associated with women, but it's also more of a social event involving the whole community. Hamblechia used to be a male-only ceremony. It involves both women and men nowadays. And it is what they say, like they're crying for vision, trying to figure out what our purpose is spiritually in life. Okay, and then we go to Wewang Wachipi, which is a sun dance. It used to also be a men-only ceremony, and it's a regeneration ceremony. Think of the sun. Our energy comes from the sun. This is a specific ceremony that is to regenerate us. Now, all of these 7 ceremonies, as you can see, just as they describe, they're about giving us direction. They're about guiding us through our lives, from childhood up through adulthood. And we believe that every one of these sacred ceremonies holds values and a morality that is expected of a Lakota. Okay, we do believe that. And there is a specific protocol and conduct involved in each ceremony and each rite. And of course, as children, in participation in these things, we learn that as we go. So that by the time it comes to our time, it's just elders instructing us, and you know, it's more of a rite. We know what that knowledge means now. And in each one of these, that's how that follows through. We believe that the continued usage of these ceremonies and rites ensures not only our commitment as individuals, but our whole society's commitment to peaceful relationships and being good relatives. And that's very, very important to Lakota people. To best see our commitment is not what we talk about. It's not what we say, but it's what we do in Lakota. And to see our commitment to this philosophy, to this way of life, you can see these types of commitments to the preservation of the earth, which for us includes almost every environmental issue that you can think of. But most recently, issues over clean water. And for us, food sovereignty, conservation, appropriate farming, and animal husbandry practices. And this type of commitment, it extends into everything that we do, whether we're putting in a water filtration plant or whether we're manning and maintaining a protest in Standing Rock. That fundamental values and stuff is what drives all of those things. I'm going to sing the third song now, and it's a healing song. And think about all the things I've been telling you. As Lakota people, this song is very simple. It says, grandfather, or God, as you would say, help me with my energy. I'm doing this so I can live. And I don't know how many of you have followed Standing Rock, but that's the core of that message. We're not doing this for notoriety. We're not doing this for extra cash. Man, made of the metals, minerals, and liquids of the earth, we need that liquid. We need that clean water. And I won't go any more into that. I think you guys get it. So as I sing this third song afterwards, I'm going to go into a little bit about how that commitment looks in Rosebud. Now, the commitments that we have in Rosebud towards these things that I was talking to you about, clean water, food sovereignty, conservation, there's so many words we can use to describe that, appropriate farming techniques and all of those things, are primarily missed by my generation, okay? And I'll tell you, okay, I'm going to explain to you a little bit how that could happen. My generation, there was more of an impetus by the governments, by everybody, powers that be, to still separate us from our roots, which is, of course, the reservation. Part of that process was to come out here, out into Western society, and to develop a career, to learn a trade, to do those kind of things. Now, there's one way of looking at this. Historically, we say that was just such a terrible thing for those white people to do, you know? And I'm saying, yes, it was something that should have never happened. But it did happen. And we can't take it back. We can't change it. And it goes back to that same old thing that a lot of people say, when life gives you lemons, what do? Well, what did I do? I fell in love with a nice woman. We had children, and I realized that in order to make lemons, I had to go to school. And it's those kind of things that I came to believe in myself that I began to pursue, knowing full well that I didn't fit, blah, 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 wasn't a part of, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But the big thing about it is, I didn't realize until much later, is that I picked up a lot of good skills, and I picked up part of this, what I'm talking to you about, innovation and scientific thinking. Okay, I'm saying that's a part of Lakota thinking too, but it's more refined out here. Okay? And those things really helped me. Because if you think about this culture and rituals, before colonization, there was no need to teach this like this. We just did it as a part of the natural way of getting up every day and going through life. The skills and the things that I picked up out in Western society are appropriate for this time. There's no way we can go back and have the pristine natural and live that way. We're going to have to deconstruct, re-engineer. There's a lot of things like that that we're going to have to do. And they're like, you need the innovation and the scientific thinking. And if you think about your history, I'm sure that it's very similar to mine if you go back far enough. And I'm saying we're all re-engineering and deconstructing at this point. We feel that? We're all in this together. Okay, now a couple of the things, I'm not going to cover a lot of different projects that we're doing. But what I'm going to try to stay in and show you who we are as human beings, the culture and the traditions, actually looks like on the far end, on the end we want to be in. Okay, I'm going to use Three Sisters gardening, one of the techniques. How many of you have heard of that? If you grew up in New York, you heard of that. Okay, and the other one I'm going to use an example, somewhat of an example. I'm going to compare cows and buffalo. Buffalo are traditional animals where I come from. We can't own Three Sisters Garden because we learned that from somewhere else. But we have other plants. If you look at Three Sisters gardening as in a way as being a way of companion planting, plants that help each other to grow, and I'll explain that a little bit. We use Three Sisters as corn, beans, and squash. Okay? Corn grows up as the stalk. You plant the beans crawl the stalk. And the squash, the large plants, cover a large area of ground. At least this is theory. Unless you've actually done it, you'll find there's a lot of other things involved in that. But the big leaves of the squash keep the moisture in the ground, as well as keeping the other plants from growing too fast. Now, there are a lot of nuances to this, okay? And it's those things, we just don't want to look at it as companion planting. When we look at that, we have to see how it, as we're doing, how it's putting something back into the earth, okay? Because we're giving back to Mother Earth. We're brothers and sisters with the plant. We got our metals, minerals, and liquids. All forms are from the metals, minerals, liquids of the earth, and everything gets its energy from the sun. So we basically follow the same patterns of life. We take from the earth, and then somehow we give back to the earth. In respect to the Three Sisters gardening, beans return nitrogen to the earth, okay? And one thing that I know at home with the introduction of cattle, cattle are not traditional to the land where I'm from. And they go out there a lot of times and they eat the wrong plants and they die. Cattle can do that. And buffalo, from where I'm from, they go out there and they know how to eat. You know the difference? And they're also not as invasive to the land. It has to do with the way that their hooves are made and how they go through. They eat, when they eat, buffaloes will eat from the top of the grass. Cows will go all the way down to the roots and pull the roots out. That's just a difference. It's just a difference, okay? And cow and buffalo, the way that they're made, if you look at them, they're natural seeders. Man, they take the seed off the grass and they can take it for miles and miles. There's just a lot of different things as you study them that you can see that they're more indigenous. They fit in with the land, okay? That commitment that I was talking about that comes from these ceremonies and rituals was missed in my generation, but now that generation, the next generation is coming through and they're picking it up. It's very important to them right now. Standing Rock, the issues at Standing Rock were first confronted by women and by youth. And that's a shift that we're going through now. Okay, and that's all the more I have to say about that. The other part to the Three Sisters Garden that I want to say is that each part of the plant is assigned a specific role, from the roots, stems, leaves, etc. And we believe that it is imbued with deep cultural, it is, understanding and meaning, and plays a big role in our ceremonies and rituals, especially when it comes to healing. I got a couple examples to kind of help people to understand that. And I'm going to use the example of honey and antihistamines and allergies. And Lakota people, we believe that spirit comes from place. And what that means is if you have allergies, the bees that go all around the area that you're living, they collect all of this nice stuff that they put into this thing they call honey. But everything that they go around and gather, all of that nice stuff that they put into that honey, is the very stuff that you need to build up your immune system. Everybody get the gist of that? And that's not trying to be over vague, but some of this stuff is better when you think it out yourself. Everybody understand that? I'm just kind of dropping a little seed in there, okay? As long as you understand that. Okay. Now, why would I come here? And why would I talk to all of you? I recognize that a lot of this cultural knowledge, like I said, it's printed. We've documented it. It's out there. But we're the same way as you. And the fact that a lot of that information gets put somewhere in our busy lives, we don't have the time, energy maybe. There's a lot of things involved to really pursue and to upgrade and to update to that information. It's common. It happens all the time. But like you, we Lakotas have realized that we either do this or we die. We're kind of at a tipping point where we can't let it go any longer. And I hope that I'm not really good at being scary because I'm always trying to help people from being scared. You know, so I'm not, but I know how many of you feel real tense at this time, not really knowing how it's going to go. You kind of feel like some bad things could happen, but you're not really, do we have time? Can we really save ourselves? I think we're all that way. The only answer to that in Lakota is that we become connected again, not only to Mother Earth, but to each other. How do we do that? In Lakota, if we would have done this really ceremonial, when I came in here, I would have shook each one of your hands. We would have shook each other's hands. That's a physical connection. We would have looked each other in the eye and said, hello, who are you? I'm so-and-so. That's how you connect. And this is what I'm trying to do out here. I'm trying to bring that understanding that I have. And it's my commitment to these things. I'm trying to encourage. I know there's a lot of people doing a lot of good things. I found that out since I came here to Santa Cruz. And there's a lot of people that really got their heads screwed on pretty good. When you're in my bubble in Rosebud, we don't know that. Now do you see why I'm trying to make connections? And I'm hoping, I know that I come out here and talk to people and people say, oh, what's going on, Sandy? What's going on, Sandy Rock? I said, do you even know who we are? Do you even know why we're doing things? And I said, I'm thinking that. Because I'm coming from a lot of years of conditioned understanding of how we get treated and how we get talked to and how we get talked about. So the first thing I want to do is come out here and say, this is who we are. This is a little bit more about who we are and how it works. And it's not like it's so great and so hard to understand, because it isn't. It's very simple. How many of you agree with me that? Agree that with me? It is. And so from the very beginning, shake your hand. This is connection. Looking at each other. That's connection. I know how many of you walk around, you don't want to connect. That's our society that does that. That's not us. We're social. Get around animals, horses. They'll show you how social happens. That's why we say to be out with nature and to be around nature shows us so much. Okay, I'm going to sing the last song. And then we will have question and answer, I guess. This last song is something that we also teach ourselves, that we have to be thankful. This song is thanking you, thanking everything. Thank you for the life you have given me, is basically the words that are being said. How many of you ever heard of Wounded Knee, the first one? It was a bad day, right? That happened in December of 1890. Okay? That happened in December of 1890. In November of 1890, Ohio State University played its first football game. Let's kind of put it in a time perspective. So 127 years ago, that's what we look like. That's how we dressed. That's how we conduct ourselves. 127 years ago, believe it or not, we were on horseback, living in teepees, chasing buffalo across the prairie. That was the last of it. That was when it ended.
Two questions, actually. First one is, when you were taken from your biological parents, did they ever visit you? Could they visit you, or did you go back to see them?
I reunited with my family part of my family in 1976. Okay, it was like 12, 13 years afterwards. So for me, my being separated from my family was not as long as some people. Now, when you go through the adoption process as an American Indian, and I think this is nationwide, everybody. They seal your court records. All. So that cuts you off effectively from being able to get back. And this is where, not to be political or not to get out of bounds, but just so that we understand, this is where a lot of American Indian people look at the adoption process and say that it was an act of genocide. They moved us from our people to a totally different culture, cut off all connections back. And some people like to say it's cultural. We say, well, what about all those people that got out here and they couldn't live because they had nobody there to help them?
You talked about, the whole focus is on teaching people to be good allies, good friends, and good family. What do you do to make things just? When somebody sort of veers off or things don't go well, how do you make things just? How do you do justice?
Well, first of all, our system works differently. Rather than having a group of people where you have a few people on the outside that are exerting external control, justice doesn't really happen the same way. When you have a group of people where everything is internally built on the same principles, the same values, those type of things over a period of time, and you always have mentors, you always have people that are coaching, always having people that are helping, because that's the whole purpose of the community. Then you have less problems of lack of justice. We work on the same things that everybody else works on. Jealousies, low self-esteem. But our culture, our rights, our ways of life are directed to building relationships that's minimized. Okay, that's a part of the plan, so to speak. Okay? And whether those things were handed down from God or whether over hundreds and hundreds of years we just realized, don't touch the hot stove, those things came to be. And as they exist today, we still, because it's only 127 years ago, we still have memories and we still have ties to those ways.
How long ago was it that the law changed that they can no longer adopt children who are Indian? I've forgotten the name of the law. Indian
ICWA.
Welfare Act?
Indian Child Welfare
Indian
Act.
Child Welfare Act.
I believe it happened in the 80s. I know that the American Indian Religious Freedom Act happened in 1978, the ability to practice our religions again. And I'm not really positive. I'm just taking a guess that it happened in the 80s.
The important thing is not when, but it did happen.
Yes.
So now that doesn't continue.
It happened, and it's like so many laws that they pass for the majority of us, it has no teeth.
Could you tell us when you were repatriated to the Lakota at what seemed like around 19 or 20 years of age, how difficult was it for you to relearn all of the history and tradition? How much had you remembered from your childhood?
I was taken at 4 years old. I was able to speak as a 4-year-old. You're going to have to all decide what that was. Why Iron EagleFeather Project exists today is because that journey home is particularly arduous, and there is no help. And when you think about you're trying to support yourself and live your life, that oppression, you're having to hold it up while you're building something down here, everything gets twisted. So what we're trying to do is to create a way to make that journey back. Because when this stuff happened to create the world we have right now, nobody had any idea that it was going to happen and that we were going to need to have these kind of things in the future. I think people actually thought they were building something better. Unfortunately, as we know now, they were a little misguided. And we're going to have to redo it. And that's what Iron EagleFeather is already assuming, is that there won't be anybody there to give us a hand. This is an on your own kind of thing, Does that make sense? Because it is our culture. I don't mind it. I'm willing to do double time, overtime for this matter. Anyway, does that kind of answer your question? Iron EagleFeather exists because that is particularly hard.
That point you made around the need to connect and sort of connect authentically, person to person, really struck a chord. I was just curious, in your own journey, what would you say is one of the most powerful or meaningful connections you've made with someone that you wouldn't maybe have otherwise come to know, or connection that you've seen made between two people that wouldn't have necessarily happened without a lot of intentional effort?
For me, the best tools, the best of ceremony and rites that I went through were the Sweat Lodge and Sundance. Okay, they did the most for me. But actually the most gut-wrenching, mind-bending, freeing experience that I went through was when I reunited with my mom. And I can't, it would take me forever. And the relationship, it's not like everybody else's relationship with their mom. In fact, there was those years where we didn't know who we were, so we didn't develop that bonding kind of a thing beyond the age of 4 years old. But when I reconnected to that, something about the energy. That's as far as I can go with that. I can't really explain it. But those other ceremonies and rituals helped me to deal with that, helped me to understand, and helped me to direct that energy back into things that were productive, other than my hurt, my low self-esteems, all the things that I went through while I was away from my mother. Okay? So in a way, just that meeting her with those other ceremonies helped me to kind of bring me back into balance.
I've heard a little bit about the communication style between the Western culture and the Indian culture, and how it's like a 180 flip of way of thinking about it. And I was just wondering what your take was on that.
You're right. In a lot of instances, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. When Lakota people talk about it and non-Lakota people hear it, oftentimes they assume that we mean a lot of things that we don't with what we say. Because, and the big thing is, as I told you, in Lakota, somehow we get the idea that there are 4 parts to our energy. And the spiritual part is a big part that isn't included out here. And we always speak with that part in mind. So the miscommunication could happen from a society that doesn't involve that in the way that they speak and the way that they hear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
And this is what I'm assuming, because I can't draw any direct correlation that, is like, of how that actually unfolds. I'm more involved in catching people who are really hurting or who really need help and trying to redirect. I hope you're following me, that rather than trying to correct that thing that we think differently, I'm trying to work with it, if that makes any sense. Thank all of you.